Good evening everyone. Today, of course, as in every video on this channel, we will fight against the atmosphere of the world around us. And today we will again enter one of my favorite topics, which is military history. And today we will talk about the military affairs of the Roman Empire, Eastern and Western, from the years of 350 AD to 425 AD. This is really a turning point because, especially on the West, military system within this period, military system collapsed on the West. But maybe not completely, not yet completely, but really stopped working properly. And the independent states of barbarians were formed after 400 AD, sometime after 400 AD, within the territory of the Western Roman Empire. How and why it happened, and nicely presented description of the history of this period, Mr. Hugh Elton in his book The Warfare in the Roman Europe 350 AD to 425 AD, Mr. Hugh Elton, American historian working currently in Canada, presents. This book is extended and a little bit modified version of his PhD thesis. His PhD thesis was defended in 1994, and this book I am referring to in this video was published in 1996. I really like the description of Roman army from the described period. It's very concise, but very informative, on the basis of the writing sources and archaeological sources as well. The description is as accurate as it can be. Also, the limitations of the sources and the limitations of our understanding of some terms and titles and ranks are also mentioned, how they were changing with time, or how we can recreate it on the basis of sources, what were the types of the units of the armies, how they were functioning, how they were sometimes transformed one into another, and so on. This book, of course, contains some controversial statements. One of the controversial statements is that barbarization of the Roman army, that by many scholars for many generations is being blamed as one of the main reasons of the fall of the Roman military system. So, effectively, at the end, the fall of the Western Roman Empire. According to Mr. Elton, this barbarization level was not so huge. Interesting hypothesis, even in the described period, 350 AD to 425 AD. But in my opinion, the method Mr. Elton used to prove his original and controversial thesis is not the best one, because he made his conclusion on the basis of preserved sources containing the names of officers and soldiers in the Roman units. The problem is that the sample, and he admits it, is small, statistically small, and actually you don't have to be Roman having a Roman name, and you don't have to be barbarian by origin having barbarian name. So this is glide surface on which Mr. Elton was walking with this hypothesis. That's why I like the way what he did, but I do not support the conclusions, because they cannot be supported, because the conclusions are based on the modest sample and on doubtful assumptions. And another very interesting conclusion I really like, and Mr. Elton kicks very painfully his colleagues by profession from Austria and Germany, claiming that statements that cavalry dominated Roman army already in the 4th and 5th century AD are not confirmed by the sources. 6th century AD, yes, cavalry dominated already Roman units, but not before. I can agree with this, and I really like it. It's brave hypothesis and nicely defended. Another hypothesis is very interesting. It's completely opposite to so-called Toronto schools, that this Toronto school assumes that barbarians who were living close to the limes, so borders of the Roman Empire, they were actually with time developing from the 1st century AD till the 4th, 5th century AD. That's why they were creating great coalitions. They were more aware politically. In a civilization terms, they were much more developed with time, becoming more and more developed. That's why they became a threat to Roman Empire. On the basis of the archaeological data, Mr. Elton claims that there is no huge difference between the barbarians from the 1st century AD and 5th century AD. Very interesting and nice hypothesis, I can agree with. And that the ability of making huge coalitions and political awareness among these barbarians was actually very elusive, let's say. It's very elusive. Sources do not confirm that. And the number of the size of the coalitions and the tribes that were invading the Roman Empire were, according to Mr. Elton, and I subscribe under it, were much more dependent on the charisma and talents of some barbarian leaders than based on some social and civilizational development these tribes are supposed to experience in the 1st century AD because of living close to Roman limes. And another issue which is very interesting, Mr. Elton says that many foreigners actually, maybe not so many as in the period we are talking about, but many foreigners were already serving in Roman units also in the centuries long before the described period. Even Julius Caesar in Gallia had a unit of Germanic warriors on his side, for instance. And another argument I really like is that on the basis of archaeological findings, artifacts, one cannot determine the nationality of the peoples who are living within some period of time on this territory, which is true. I subscribe under it. And the findings for the barbarians from this period for different territories, artifacts are of very similar quality. We can try to differentiate between nomadic societies on the basis of the number of bones of animals preserved with the artifacts of these people left by these peoples found in these layers of the ground. From the settled communities, we can try to differentiate nomads from settled communities. Yes, it's true. I also think so. And another very interesting hypothesis is also from Mr. Elton that we cannot simply blame some only singular factors for the fall of Roman Empire, and in his opinion, for long Roman army was functioning well. I can also say it that even in difficult situations they were able to oppose the barbarians, which is actually true. And this is, of course, this work contains some controversial hypotheses, even very controversial, some debatable even, but such work is needed. Luckily it's read and it's commented to make a scientific process, investigation, follow the right path. Follow the right path and make our understanding of the investigated historical period better and more complex. So I really appreciate such works like Warfare of the Roman Europe 350 to 425 by Hugh Elton, and I really recommend you to read it. It's a very good read and very good profitable book. All the best, have a nice evening, bye.